Tertullian represented Africa and Rome. St. Irenaeus represented Asia Minor and Gaul. Other writers he cited from the 4th century: St. Cyril of Alexandria spoke for Palestine, St. Ephraim for Syria, St. Epiphanius, Egypt, Palestine, and Cyprus, and St. Jerome for the whole world except Africa, but St. Augustine spoke for Africa. Newman drew the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception as an inference from the second Eve, one that he could not resist. He says, "And if Eve had this supernatural inward gift given her from the first moment of her personal existence, is it possible to deny that Mary too had this gift from the very first moment of her personal existence? I do not know how to resist this inference. Well, this is simply and literally the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. I say the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception is in its substance this, and nothing more or less. The doctrine of the Fathers that Mary is the second Eve. Mary may be called, as it were, a daughter of Eve unfallen." It was so obvious for Newman the way which seemed most conclusive. This was the way which could best explain the Immaculate Conception. The doctrine of the second Eve was very clear, and it made the dogma of the Immaculate Conception understandable. Thinking of the many eminent theologians in the Middle Ages, such as St. Augustine, St. Anselm, St. Albert, St. Bernard, and St. Thomas Aquinas, and others, who had difficulty with the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, Newman writes, "It is indeed to me a strange phenomenon that so many learned and devout men stumble at this doctrine. Had they based their reflection on the patristic notion of the second Eve, they too would not have found themselves unsure of how it could happen that a daughter of Adam could be preserved free from original sin." Newman linked the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception with the doctrine of the Assumption of Mary into heaven, body and soul, both doctrines implicit in the doctrine of the second Eve. It was fitting that Mary should be honored in her Assumption, because God, in owing his mother for the elements of his human body, would not allow the flesh and blood from which it was taken to molder in the grave. He rhetorically asked, who can conceive that the virginal frame, which never sinned, was to undergo the death of a sinner? Why should she share the curse of Adam, who had no share in this fall? The Blessed Virgin Mary, after her assumption into heaven, continues in heaven her role of advocate, a word used by St. Irenaeus in speaking of Mary as the second Eve. St. Irenaeus did refer to Mary as Advocata Evae, a patroness or advocate of Eve. An aim of the Oxford movement was to acknowledge and to affirm the Catholicity of the Anglican Church. However, latent in the mind of some Tractarians was the possible reunion between the Church of England and the Church of Rome. Newman was not among the Oxford movement members who thought reunion possible. Back in 1833, on a visit to Rome, while admiring the beauties of Rome and the splendid sight of St. Peter's illuminated, It was clear in Newman's mind that reunion with Rome was not possible. Oh, that Rome were not Rome, but I seem to see as clear as day that a union with her is impossible. She is the cruel church asking of us impossibilities, excommunicating us for disobedience, and now watching and exulting over our approaching overthrow. For his part, Newman did not think that any corporate form of reunion would occur, but only a personal reunion, as happened in his case with his reception into the Catholic Church on the 9th of October 1843 by Father Dominic Barbieri. Newman thought that too much would be demanded of both Roman and of Canterbury, and both would have to change, which were not likely to happen. While still an Anglican, Newman was convinced that an essential aspect or ingredient of reunion was holiness, and not just a state of being in a Christian, but as a mark of the Church. And he was convinced that the Roman Catholic Church was lacking in the mark of holiness. An obstacle standing in the way of any reunion between the Church of England and the Church of Rome was the Catholic cultus, Catholic cult of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Pusey strongly desired a reunion. However, he feared that Catholic excesses in Marian devotion and doctrine would impede any reunion between Canterbury and Rome. He felt that the dogma of the Immaculate Conception should not be proclaimed, but left as a matter of private belief and practice. In his lengthy and highly polemical work addressed to Newman, An Irenicon, literally a peace offering, intended to promote peace among Anglicans and Roman Catholics, Pusey took issue with the perceived excesses in Catholic Marian doctrine and devotion, heavily inspired by the works of Marian writers like Louis de Montfort and Alphonsus Ligori, foreigners as he called them, but whose works were translated into English and disseminated in England by Frederick W. Faber, a former Tractarian and a convert to Catholicism. Intercession of the Virgin Mary in prayer was also frowned upon. Pusey, in seeing no necessity of invoking the intercession of the Virgin Mary, remarked to Newman that it could be inferred that St. Augustine and other fathers did not hold that there was any such necessity, since, as you, Newman, observed, no prayer to the Blessed Virgin is to be found in the voluminous works of St. Augustine. The attacks and criticisms leveled against Roman Catholics by Pusey provided Newman with the call, as he says, to respond to Pusey in order to state the true position of the Catholic Church about Marian doctrine and devotion. Newman's Catholic Mariology is best expressed in his letter to Pusey. The Mariology emerging from Newman's letter to Pusey re-echoed much of Newman's earlier thoughts on Mary expressed in his Anglican sermons, as well as what he had learned about Mary from his earlier readings of the Fathers of the Church. In this letter to Pusey, Newman defended certain extravagances in themselves and expressions of strong love and devotion and dedication as both necessary and important. He felt that private religious devotions may go to extravagant length and may involve silly little expressions of affection uttered between lovers, sometimes in love letters, and he was quite content to admit of this among some people who wished to show their love for Mary in this way. He tells Pusey, "I would not give much for that love which is never extravagant, which always observes the proprieties and can move about in perfect good taste under all emergencies." He also defended statements in the writings and sermons of Catholics that sounded exaggerated. For example, what mother, what husband or wife, what youth or maiden in love, but says 1,000 foolish things in the way of endearment, which the speaker would be sorry for strangers to hear. Yet they are not in that account unwelcome to the parties to whom they are addressed. Sometimes, by bad luck, they are written down. Sometimes they get into the newspapers, and what might be even graceful when it was fresh from the heart and interpreted by the voice and the countenance presents but a melancholy exhibition when served up cold for the public eye. So it is with devotional feelings. Burning thoughts and words are as open to criticism as they are beyond. Using another comparison, Newman recalls the outflow of fanfare, respect, affection, admiration and esteem shown towards the then Queen of England, Queen Victoria, at her coronation on the 28th of June in 1838, when she was just 18 years old. The people, he said, gazed on the figure of one so like a child, so small, so tender, so shrinking, who had been exalted to such great an inheritance and so vast a rule, who was such a contrast in her own person to the solemn pageant that centered in her. Newman felt that if there could be such an outburst of emotion towards an earthly queen in England, surely Anglicans could understand that an all-wise God, knowing the human heart, knew that when he took to himself a mother, there would be an excessive outpouring of love and devotion at the sight of such an exaltation in one so simple and so lowly as Mary. Much more could be said about Newman's Catholic Mariology if time permitted. However, as far as Newman was concerned, no matter how exaggerated Catholic Marian devotions might have seemed, they never took away anything from the worship of the Son of God. Cardinal Newman is today regarded as a pioneer in ecumenical theology. The word ecumenism was not in use in the 19th century England, and the spirit of ecumenism was alive among Anglicans who desired reunion with Rome. Echoes of Newman's voice can be heard in the Seattle Statement of Agreement of the ARCIC, the Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission, entitled Mary, Grace and Hope in Christ. The ARCIC came about through the initiatives of Pope Paul VI following the Second Vatican Council, which also anachronistically regarded Newman as the father of Second Vatican Council. Cardinal Newman's voice is prophetically heard in Lumen Gentium chapter 8, in which a balanced Mariology is presented, one which was corrective of Mary's true position vis-a-vis Jesus, and also about her true position in the Church. Mary, is satisfied and reverenced when we make Christ the center of our lives and seek her intercession within the church, where she is with us both as the Mother of God and the Mother of the Church. This was the approach of Cardinal Newman in his Marian doctrine and devotion, who, on becoming a Roman Catholic, did not succumb to any excessive proliferation in his Marian doctrine and devotion. He did not go from being a Protestant Marian minimalist to being an exaggerated Catholic maximalist. He tactfully positioned himself and his Marian doctrine somewhere in the middle between two extremes, in which Marian doctrine would neither be more nor less.